Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight as we welcome Susan Stone. She's a family coach, an author, and a speaker, and she's presenting on tools for parenting your tween. We want to thank the PTA for sponsoring this event, and we want to give Susan a warm virtual welcome. And thank you, everyone, for attending. And thank you, Susan, for being with us tonight.
Thank you so much, Linda. It's so nice to be back. I don't remember when I was here last, but it's been this year. I want to congratulate all you parents. You've made it. We're coming out to the end of this school year. Some of your kids are back in school, and some are doing the hybrid version. But you've made it, and I know that it has been a really hard year for a lot of us. I've been working with parents individually and talking to school groups, and I know how rough it is. And I just want to tell all of you that you've done a great job. This has been a hard year. I think schools will be back in session fully next year, and so hopefully we can wrap up this year and have a wonderful, safe summer and get back to school next year. Okay, so I am going to share my screen. I have a PowerPoint presentation. While I'm in the middle of the presentation, I'm not able to take questions because I'm not that coordinated. So what I would ask you to do is to please type any questions you have in the chat box. You all know down at the bottom of your screen, you can click on the chat box. And please put your question in the chat box. And of course, there'll be plenty of time after I turn off the PowerPoint for you to raise your hand, your real hand or your virtual hand, and ask a question that way also. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started here. This is always the challenging part. This is always the nerve-wracking part. And Kim and Linda, I just want to say you're the two people that I can see. So I'm watching for your reaction. So that's a good thing. So anyways, so welcome everybody. We are going to talk about parenting your tween. Wow, what an interesting stage as you head into tweendom. A little bit about me. I'm a coach, I'm a speaker, I'm an author, I'm a certified special education teacher. I've taught teenagers in juvenile hall. I've operated home-based preschools. I've run crisis hotlines. I've done all kinds of different stuff with children. I am the author of a book called Real Parents, Real Kids, Real Talk. I coach individual families, meaning either on Zoom or in person. I coach. I am a mom, of course. I have an adult son named Brandon, who's 36, and I have a 32-year-old daughter named Casey, she's 32, and Brandon and his wife just gave me my first grandchild. So that's very exciting. That's different from how I've been able to say my grandson is 1 month old, and it's truly thrilling. I don't feel old enough to be a grandmother, but I'm thrilled to be a grandmother, and it's a good thing. So that's a little bit about me. Let's talk about an overview of parenting. And what you see here is you see our toddlers and you see our kids and we see our teens and we see our, college age kids. And I just think that the goal of parenting is to raise a successful adult. That's the term that I use. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But that's what I think is the only goal of parenting, is trying to turn any of this age people into a successful adult. So I always start off by asking parents to think to themselves, what do you want your child to be like at 21? We call them adults at 21 because they're finishing their schooling and they can legally drink and they're moving out of the house. But it's important to remember that our children's brains are not done developing until more like age 25 or 26. So when we call them adults at 21, it's true, but the prefrontal cortex of the brain is not fully developed. That's the part of the brain that helps us to stop and think and make good choices. And that's actually not developed till much later in life. So when you look at your 6-year-old or your 9-year-old and you go, why did you do that? What made you think that was a good idea? The answer is because I have an undeveloped brain and I'm just a kid and I don't see things the same way that you the adult sees things. But I do ask you what you want your child to be like at age 21. I want you to turn to your parenting partner tonight or tomorrow and ask them that. When my son Brandon was born, I'd already been working with kids for 16 years. I had a lot of experience. And I said on his 21st birthday, I want him to be honest and kind and responsible and capable and emotionally close to me. And if on his 21st birthday, that's the kind of person he is, that I will have done my job. And so that's what I have to do every day of his life is I have to teach him. I have to teach him to be honest and kind and responsible. And we have to remember that everything has to be taught, and everything has to be taught long before they need to do it by themselves. So if you look at these pictures, it's really not that important that my 3-year-old is honest. It's really, really important that my teenager is honest. But I'm not going to wait till they become a teenager to teach them to be honest. I'm going to start teaching them to be honest when they're a preschooler so that they have years of experience. I think that all of you can remember teaching your children how to cross the street. You started doing that when they were 2 and in a stroller, and you were saying, look both ways, use the crosswalk, we push the button. You were teaching them how to cross the street long before they needed to do it by themselves. So all those traits and values that you come up with, like I did, I want you to recognize that you need to start teaching them today. Whatever age your child is, start teaching those traits today. And of course, what's the easiest way to teach those traits is to recognize that you are your child's role model. Your kids at every age look to you. They look to see what you say. They look to see how you act. And so what I tell parents all the time is, I want you to be the person you want your child to be, and I want you to act the way you want your child to act. So how do you teach a child to be kind? You act kind to other people. And how do you teach your children to be honest? You make a point of being honest in front of your kids. When you are with them, act like you have those traits, which you do, and your children will learn them from you. And then my final point here is that I do believe that teaching our children how to make good choices is probably the most important thing we can teach. Successful adults make good choices. And especially as we head into raising tweens who start to become rather complicated little creatures, we want to start teaching them to make good choices. So let's look at some development, and we're going to start off by looking at emotional development. And I like to call the tween years the roller coaster years, and you are approaching them. Our kids are in a good mood, and then they're in a bad mood, and then they're in a good mood, and then they're in a bad mood. And what we do as parents is we tend to follow them. So they're in a good mood, oh, we're right there up there with them, but then they're in a bad mood and we crash down with them. And that really doesn't work very well. I have 2 different roller coasters here. It would be nice if our kids did have a nice, easy roller coaster, but I think the bottom roller coaster is more what tweens live on, okay? And they have really strong emotions, and that starts to happen during puberty, and they really can be happy one moment and then angry or sad the next. And you're like, what is going on? I don't understand. And the truth is, your child doesn't understand either. It's just sometimes their emotions get the better of them, and they can't really explain it, but it's to be expected that there's a roller coaster ride of emotions. I say that we need to stay off their roller coaster. It doesn't help them for us to follow them on their roller coaster. We need to be on our own roller coaster, which is really just kind of right in the middle. So we're not flatline, that would be dead. We're not dead, but following them on their up and down doesn't help them. I also want to tell you about emotional development. Is that typically between ages 12 and 14, and I know that's could be a lot earlier. Some of your kids could be 8 or 9. They start to become more aware of their own sexuality and other people's sexuality, and they start getting really nervous about, is my body the right way? Is my body the wrong way? And I'm looking at other people's bodies and I'm confused. So just to start recognizing that some of your kids are going to start having those thoughts and wanting to have those kinds of conversations with you. Also, tweens Seems early, and I know, but they do start thinking about, am I straight? Am I gay? What they start having those thoughts. So again, great things to have conversations with your kids about. We'll talk in a little while about how to have those conversations, but these are good things to talk about with your kids, because even if they don't bring them up to you, a lot of our kids start thinking about them as they become tweens. Now, let's look at social development as it relates to parents. And what maybe some of you are seeing is that the friendships they have, the relationships they have with kids starts to become more important than the relationships they have with parents. They need you just as much, but in terms of they start listening to their friends and they're worried about their friends and they start tuning us out a little bit. So just again, really normal, really typical. Tweens, start to become really resistant to any physical affection from their parents. But so my kids will say to me like, "Mom, stop hugging me." But then I see them run up to their friends and hug their friends when they could hug pre-COVID. They'll get there again. I recognize that. But don't take it personally when your kids start saying, "Mom, don't hug me in front of my friends." They're embarrassed by it. So again, very, very normal. Um, a lot of our tweens become really emotionally sensitive, right? Because their emotions are going up and down and they're easily offended and they're easily hurt. I like to say that one wrong word from a parent can end a good conversation. I remember one time I was talking with my daughter and I told her that I loved her lilac colored shirt and she yelled, "It's not lilac, it's purple." And she stormed off and like that was the end of the conversation. I was like, but one wrong word can end a great conversation. We want to look for teachable moments to talk with your kids about big topics. It's kind of our job as parents is to, we can talk about politics and we can talk about things, we can talk about COVID and we can talk about vaccinations, and we want to bring things up and let our kids know I'm here for you to talk to. So we want to be the ones to bring up some conversations. We're not going to force our kids to talk, but it is okay to say, "Guess what I heard on the news?" or "Have you heard about this?" I know that, there's been a lot of trauma in our kids' lives lately. There's been fires and there's been, all kinds of terrible things. And there's COVID and a lot of conversation about loss and illness. And I think that we want to make sure that we're bringing things up so that our kids know that we are safe people for them to talk with. So ways to do that: I like watching TV and movies together. I'm going to follow politics. I'm going to ask my kids for their opinions. I'm going to ask them for their ideas, and I'm going to ask them for their help. Right? Kids love being helpful, except when you ask them to do chores. Then they don't want to be helpful. I get it. But when you ask them their opinion, when you say something like, "What do you think about that?" or "What would you have done in that situation?" they really do like engaging on that level. So those are great ways to start connecting with our kids. Remember, one of my goals when my kids were 21 is that they were emotionally close to me. Well, I can't wait till they're 21 to be emotionally close. I'm going to start today to develop that emotional closeness long before they need to do it by themselves. Okay, let's look at social development with friends. And as I mentioned earlier, peer pressure now becomes a stronger influence. Tweens want to be just like everyone else. They don't want to stand out. They want to wear the same clothes. They want to listen to the same music. They want to watch the same TV shows. They want to wear the same Uggs. They want to wear the same PJ pants. They want to be just like each other. And so they start to pay attention to what their peers are doing, and they want to start doing more of what their peers are doing. I like to talk to kids about the term peer pressure. And oftentimes when I work with kids, I'll ask them what peer pressure means. And they know. And they'll tell me it's when a friend tries to get you to do something you don't want to do. And I always say, "Oh, that's really close, except a friend would never try to get you to do something you don't want to do." So I think it's an interesting way to talk about it, right? Peers might do that. People who aren't close to you might try to convince you, but a friend wouldn't do that. A friend would accept no for an answer and would be okay. Um, we want to understand that, some tweens start to do things that they would never do alone. And so as we get into the tween years, and now we're talking the upper tween years, so we're talking 11, 12, up in there, we might begin to see more serious behaviors. They might really start talking back or rolling their eyes or doing things. You might see kids who shoplift, right? Which they would never do by themselves, but they're with a friend and they go into a store and the friend says they should do it, and so they can get talked into it. So it's just something to kind of pay attention to. I am not accusing any of your children of doing any of these behaviors, but we all have to be honest and realistic and know that it might be that my child wouldn't do that, but my child might be around another child who is doing those things. So we can't close our mind off and think, oh, that doesn't happen, because it does happen. Friendships can be really complex. We don't really understand them. One minute somebody's your daughter's best friend, and the next day they hate them, and then they're back to being best friends again. And again, that goes along with that roller coaster ride that our kids are on. So, it used to be that it was really easy just to set up a play date for our third grader, and the kids would just play. But it gets much more complicated. Also, at this age, we're starting to see, cliques. That's a word that not everybody still uses. I remember that word from my own adolescence. But, groups start forming, and we've got the athletic crowd and the in crowd and the music crowd. And it's when we start hearing about, like Mean Girls and things like that. So kids start to be really aware of who's in what group, even if they can't figure out what group they're in themselves, right? And I think that most of us are talking to our kids about, you don't have to be in a group. You can be friends with lots of kids. And so it's not all of our kids feel the need to be in a group, but they're still really aware of what groups are out there. And they're really aware of who's in what group. And then, of course, as your kids get older and they're all on, computers more now than we wanted them to be, and their iPads and their texting. As you introduce social media, and as you introduce your kids to cell phones and being online, social and cyberbullying becomes more common. So it's something that we really have to pay attention to. It's not something we worry about so much, again, with our third and fourth and fifth graders, but as they start becoming tweens, it's something we want to pay attention to as they start entering middle school. Okay, so let's look at physical development. Hormones reign at this stage, right? Puberty, though, has really different stages. Puberty can start anywhere between 8 and we say that they grow at different rates between 8 and 18. So you see lots of kids of lots of different sizes in middle school. We have to recognize that with a lot of growth spurts, they start being really clumsy and uncoordinated, and they trip and they stick out their arm to grab a cup of milk from you, and they spill it because they didn't realize their arm was that big as they reached out to grab it. So really understanding that our kids feel a little bit, physically unbalanced. We really want to help our kids, though, find ways to be physical. So not all of our kids can play soccer. Not all of our kids are athletes, but maybe they can walk a dog, or maybe they can get into bowling, or maybe they can jump on a trampoline, right? Or go hiking, right? We want to find ways for our kids. They can go bike riding. We want to find our ways to be physical. And I think especially with girls, that kids who have a physical outlet, who can act out physically, maybe they will act out less emotionally. Maybe if they have the ability to kick a soccer ball or to run around, maybe they won't snap at us as often when we say, please come to the dinner table. right? Because they're able to release some of their emotions in a physical way. And so I encourage all of you to find some sort of physical outlet for your kids, just whatever it might be. It does not have to be a team sport. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. A lot of our kids are resistant to team sports because they're starting to say, I'm not in the athletic crowd. They're starting to say, oh, I'm not very good at that. Younger kids are much more, I'll try, let's do it. Tweens are much more, oh, I'm not good at that. So it doesn't have to be a team sport, but we would like them to find some sort of physical outlet. Okay, so let's talk about our tweens' online life. And I don't know any of you. I don't know if your kids are online. What I do think is that all of us, adults and kids, are online more than we want them to be. So I will be curious to hear when I end this. I'd love to know how many of your kids are playing video games and how many have cell phones. But our kids are online a lot. And if they're not online a lot now, they're going to be very soon. There's a lot of video game playing, there's a lot of texting, there's a lot of emails, there's a lot of stuff going on. So what I said was, kids need limits. It's hard. I need limits. I need to remind myself it's time to put down your phone and go put it on in the other room and leave it alone for the night. So I need to limit myself. Most of our kids need help with limits. And so conversations you can have with your kids are, for you to decide as parents. I mean, how many minutes a day are we going to allow them to play Minecraft? And do they play more on the weekdays? And is it limited on the weekdays, and on the weekends you throw up your hands and go, I don't care, do whatever you want? Or perhaps you say you're only allowed to be on a screen from, I'm making this up, obviously, from 3 to 5. And then at 5 o'clock, we're done with screens for the day. Or maybe they're allowed to be on from 3 to 4 and again from 7 to 8 if their homework is finished, right? So these are kind of the conversations to have. We want our tween to maybe buy into the plan. So as opposed to saying, here's the rule, this is what we're doing, asking them, what do you think? When do you think is a good time? How many minutes do you think? And when they say, oh, I should be on it 3 hours a day, and you go, 3 hours is too much. We got to find a lower number than that. But at least you're having that conversation. So then what I said is, maybe you allow them to choose when they can spend their screen time, but then you can help them say, is now the best time? So when your kid comes home from school or finishes school, online school for the day, and they say, I want to play Minecraft now for 1 hour. And you could say, well, you can play it now for 1 hour, but that's all you're limited to for the whole day. So the truth is, you might want to play some more later. But if you play it now, you won't be able to later. So that's what I mean by helping them to talk about, is now the best time to do it? And it might be that they go, yes, I want to do it now. And you go, okay, well, then you can do it now, but you won't be able to do it again later. And then the most important thing I can tell you about their online life is all electronics. I don't support kids having electronics in their bedrooms. When they're juniors and seniors, they can have it in their bedroom, but I think they should be kept in common areas. I think kids should be doing schoolwork at the dining room table or the kitchen table or living room. If they do need to be in their rooms because of the size of your house and because mom and dad are home working also, I understand that, but keep the door open so that you have a better idea of what your kids are doing online. And finally, all devices, cell phones, iPads, whatever they have, should be charged in a parent's bedroom overnight. I can't tell you how many kids say to me, oh, well, we have to charge our electronics downstairs in the kitchen, but then as soon as my mom falls asleep, I go down to the kitchen and I get it. So they're not going to come into your bedroom and get it. So I really do, again, until your kids are much older, I think that devices should be charged in the parent's bedroom overnight. I don't think kids should have electronics in their bedroom. I have so many parents say to me, well, I trust my child. My child tells me that they won't use their phone at night. And I say, I totally believe you. I believe that your child is not texting or calling anybody. but friends are texting and calling her. And the phone beeps every time there's an email or every time there's an alert on social media. So it might be true that your child is not using their devices, but they're getting pinged and called by other people. So it's good for them to not have it. And I don't have it on here, but we all should be off of electronics like an hour before bedtime. It helps us sleep better. That goes true for adults also, but especially for kids. Okay, a little bit about communication, how to listen and how to talk. As your child gets older, you need to talk less and listen more. It's the number one tip I can give you. As your child gets older, you need to talk less and listen more. Your kids need to be heard. Your kids need someone to listen to them. And you need to be able to say, I will listen to anything. I just shared something on my professional Facebook page that said if you don't listen to the little stuff when they're little, they won't tell you the big stuff when they're big. So you gotta listen to whatever they want to talk about. I think we have to listen to what they say, not just how they say it. Sometimes we get wrapped up in the fact that our child said something rude to us or they said it in a rude way. And so we acknowledge the rudeness, but we don't actually hear what they said. So I want you to try to remember to listen to what they're saying and not just how they say it. I want you to respond with empathy. They can't move on until they feel heard and understood. So when they say, I hate math and I'm not doing this assignment, and you say, oh, yes, you are. Well, that's not very empathetic. If you say, oh, I know sometimes math is a drag, but we still need to do it. That's being empathetic. Or if they say, I hate school, and you go, no, you don't, you go to a wonderful school. Well, no, they hate school. That's why they said it. They might not hate school forever, but in that moment, you need to go, oh, I know sometimes school is hard. You need to respond with empathy so they feel heard and understood. You need to talk when they're ready, not just when you are. You know, as parents, they come in the door after school or we see them after school and we go, so how was school and what'd you do? And did you find your jacket? And what did the math teacher say? What homework do you have? And the kid is like, it's too much. It's too much. But maybe if we just gave them a little space and talked to them later, they'd be more ready to talk. So talk when they're ready to talk, not just when you are. The best places to talk in the car. I know we're not in the car as much as we used to be, but in the car. At the dinner table, during an activity, and later at night. Okay, bedtime to me is by far the best place to talk. What all of those things have in common is that they don't require eye-to-eye contact. So we're not saying, you need to look at me while we talk. No. In the car, we're looking in different directions. And at the dinner table, I'm looking down at my food. And, you know, girls develop relationships through conversation and boys develop relationships during an activity. So especially with your boys, doing something, throwing a ball, playing a video game, right? Walking the dog, it's a great way to connect. And again, at bedtime is a wonderful time to connect. My daughter, when she turned 12, she wanted a loft bed. And I said, oh, but if I get you a loft bed, I can't sit on your bed at night and ask you about your day. And she's like, oh, Mom, it doesn't matter. I don't need that anymore. I'm too old for that. So we got her a loft bed. And 2 days later, she said, Mommy, I hate my loft bed because you can't sit next to me and ask me about my day. So we got rid of the loft bed. It lasted 2 days. So bedtime is a wonderful time to talk with your kids. And the last thing about listening and talking is try not to yell. I know it's hard not to yell, but yelling just doesn't help. My mom was a yeller. My dad actually went to jail when I was 4 years old, and my mom became a very angry woman, and she yelled and yelled and yelled. And when I was 5, I said, when I grow up, I'm going to be a mommy and I'm not going to yell. And then I grew up and I became a mommy and I yelled because we often act like our parents. And so I taught myself not to yell by doing 2 things. One thing I did was I put a rubber band on my wrist, and every time I started to yell, I snapped it. And every time I thought about yelling, I snapped it. And every time I saw it, it reminded me that I was working on not yelling. But the other thing I did is I just pretended my kid was somebody else's kid, because I would never yell at somebody else's kid. So when I felt myself getting angry at my child, I literally took a step back and I said, that's my neighbor. Because to my neighbor, I would go, dude, that's not okay. But to my own child, I would yell. Okay. So just pretend your tween is somebody else's kid. And then a few different, real quick, as we wrap up here, some creative ways to communicate. First of all, kids don't like questions, if you haven't noticed that by now. And as tweens get older and become teens, especially, they really don't like questions. So, what did you do today is a really bad question. Kids do not like that question. Tell me one thing you did today. Is first of all, it's a statement and it's also an easier question. My parents are only asking me one thing. I can answer that. But what did you do today? I did 1,000 things, Mom, and I don't even know where to start. Okay. As parents, we need to recognize that you don't need to know everything. You just need to know enough that you feel like I know what's going on, enough that I feel like my kid is safe. And what I tell kids is you don't have to tell your parents everything, but you have to tell them enough. You can't just not tell your parents anything. You don't have to tell them everything. You have to tell them enough that your parents feel like they know you're safe and that they know what's going on. We talked about choices. You got to start letting them make some of their own choices. You ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? And then you let your child experience the consequences of the choice they made. And if you can live with what's the worst that could happen, then so can they. Okay. A response is better than a reaction. A reaction is that gut reaction. A response is pausing for a minute, thinking about it, and then calmly responding is much better than just reacting. With our tweens and teens, we need to learn the value and the art of compromise. I gave you the example of, they want to play Minecraft for 3 hours and you say 3 hours is too much. How about if we settle on an hour and a half, right? You got to compromise. You can't say 5 minutes if they want 3 hours. You gotta be good at compromising. And finally, we have to remember that not everything is an emergency. I think as parents, we get so worried and some things happen and we're like, oh no, what are we going to do? And the truth is that let's take a deep breath. It's not an emergency. It might be a problem, but not every problem is an emergency. And so we can relax and enjoy them a little bit. And the final thing that I just want to pop up here is my contact information to let everybody know that I am a coach. So people can hire me for an hour Zoom session. But I offer free 30-minute consultations. So anybody who wants to, give me a call or send me an email and ask me, I am more than happy. You can tell me where you met me, and I'm more than happy to, spend some time with you on the phone. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. I know I talked a lot. Thank you all for hanging in there and listening to me. And I don't see any questions in the chat box, which means I've told you everything you want to know about parenting your teen. That is awesome. Kim, I bet you have a question for me, don't you? I'm picking on you because you were nodding and you were smiling. So Kim, do you have any question for me?
I want to give you a shout out because I was like, she sounds so familiar. Your voice sounds familiar. And then I realized, oh, I listened to you talk at Santa Clara Parents Nursery School back in like 2017. And the one thing that really got me was the rubber band. And like that like tactile relationship with the rubber band really like drives home, like, don't yell. And then the neighbor's kid, you're not going to yell at your kid if they're in some kind of harmful way, of course you're going to be like, get out of the street. But it definitely, I hear these things, and I'm a teacher at the middle school level, and I've learned a lot through the years. But what I really love, and this is more of a comment, is that you're concise with what you say. And like, I learn it over and over again, but it's still something that you have to hear as a parent, because it goes in one ear and out the other, just like what we say to our kids, like, go brush your teeth, go brush your teeth. And then by the time they're 29, they'll brush their teeth without me, right?
Sooner than 29, even sooner.
I hope so. I don't know. My son might not get there until 29.
How old is he now, Kim?
He hears me in the background. I have a set of twins and they're finishing up 3rd grade. So
and does he have a hard time brushing his teeth?
I think he can totally do it. It's just the transition. I think with kids, transition, I see it at 12-year-olds in my classes. Transitions are hard for some people. Transitions are hard for me. So giving some grace and some patience and being able to do that. Yeah.
I think giving some grace and giving some patience and then saying to your son, I see that sometimes it's hard to transition from playing to brushing your teeth. So what can we do together to make that transition easier? Instead of just go brush your teeth, I'm sick of telling you to brush your teeth. And instead of just looking at it as something that we're going to accomplish by raising our voice or simply directing them, let's work together. Let's try to figure out, why is this hard? I see that it's hard. And so what can we do together to make it easier? Do you need a 5-minute warning? Do you want to, maybe it's easier to brush your teeth right after dinner before you go play. Right? So I love the concept of working together, and especially as your kids start getting older. I mean, it's different when he was 4, or 3, you'd pick him up and carry him in the bathroom, but we don't want to do that anymore, right? So that concept of working together as a team to figure out how to solve that problem, I think is a really good thing. Okay. Thank you, Kim. I appreciate that. Yes, Anna, I see your hand up.
I had a question. So I have a 12-year-old and 10-year-old. And what would you suggest as a good night routine, in the sense of, when they were younger, I read them stories and it was fun. But now they read on their own a lot. So like, they don't need me to do that anymore. And so bedtime is kind of more, good night, mommy. And that's kind of it. And it makes me a little bit sad. So just a little bit. So yeah, just like.
So what I would do is first of all, I always love this, because to me there's a bedtime, which means the time that we ask our children to be literally in bed. But then there's also a lights out time, right? So that might be different. So maybe your kids, Anna, do your kids go like can they go to bed and read for, let's say, 20 minutes? And then you could go in there after those 20 minutes and just, kind of, as I said, like just sit on the edge of the bed and say, hey, let's talk about your day. Let's just talk for a couple minutes. And if they go, Mom, you can go, but I miss you. When you were little, I could do this and I miss you. And I think our kids like it. It might be new to them if you haven't been doing this. But you could say to them, Anna, you know what? I miss spending time with you at the end of the day. So, would it be okay with you if I came in and we just talked for a couple more minutes? Some kids love it because the more they talk, the later they can stay up. See, I would let my kids stay up as long as they wanted if they were talking with me. and also, by the way, that's when I would hear that they'd actually gotten in trouble at school, or that a friend had been mean to them, or that somebody had yelled at them, or they had spilled their milk. I wouldn't hear those things earlier in the day. So I think, Anna, just being really honest with your kids and saying, I miss having something to do at bedtime with you. And what could we do together? Could I just come in between you reading and right when you're ready to turn the light out? Can I come in and say goodnight to you? And they might say, no, we'd really rather you not. And then we'll just go, okay. But you can ask. You can't get what you want if you don't ask. Right?
True. We had those darn loft beds too.
So it is. So it's a little bit different. Teresa, did you have a question? Yeah. Oh, you have to unmute first. Oh, you're going to get there.
There we go. There we go. Every time I tried to hit it, it kept going back. Sorry about that. Okay. This is so great. So my question, I guess, is around kind of the fears of, they really started to develop maybe 6 to 8, but then they're just changing around the tween ages. And, you know, as you talked about, being really honest about, you know, things that are going on, and you know, everything. And there's those fears though that now seem more palpable, right? Like there's not a monster in the closet anymore. There's actually, you know, like a real external person now who's become the monster or who is doing things, right? And so how to just kind of work with them around that, I guess, is kind of my question, because it just feels like they're shifting in terms of their fears, you know, like fears used to be this thing like, oh, I don't know. And now they're very like concrete. And I don't want to, like, I notice my own stuff come up, right? It's like they want to be more independent and they want to go and do bike rides around the block all by themselves. And I'm like, oh God, the white van is going to pull up next to them, you know? And I don't want them to be afraid of that. And I want to feel like I'm instilling in them that they will not get into the white van if someone talks to them. But at the same time, I'm terrified that they're going to get into the white van because they're going to be like, oh, come and look at my cute dog in my van. And they're going to like, oh, that's so cute. I love dogs. And there you go. You know, so you know what I mean? Like that's, how do you, it's not, oh, we're not talking to them as like little kids anymore. But now at this age, it becomes more real. So A, I don't want to terrify them to never leave the house. And B, though, I want to, like you said, what do they want to be at 21? I want them to be smart. I want them to be, you know, street smart, sort of, and yet kind and honest. But I almost feel like if I'm teaching them kindness, they're going to get in the white van.
Yeah. So I think that we do have to be really careful and recognize that first of all, we do need to teach them not to get into the white van. Like
right.
We absolutely need that lessons. I mean, I'm a lot older than anyone else on here, but I can remember being taught about stranger danger, right? I mean,
yeah, for sure.
So we do have to do it. We also have to do it with we don't think the white van is going to be coming, but we do have to talk about stuff honestly. And I think that there's a big difference between the fear of teaching our children how to be safe, both in person and on social media. Kimberly, I just love that. So I'm going to come to you next because Kimberly, I see you. I love that hand. So I think that we have to be careful that you know, we have to teach our kids about stranger danger once they start going online. Right? It's just right. So, but there's a big difference between teaching our kids about stranger danger and then the other anxiety that you have about they want to ride their bike around. We have to teach them how to ride their bike around the block and be safe. And one way we do it is you know, like your kid says they want to ride to school, right?
Right.
Well, we don't just go, okay, fine, ride to school and don't get in the white van. We have to practice it, right? So we say, well, for the first week, I'm going to lead and you're going to follow me so that you're learning the path. And then the second week, I'm going to let you lead, but I'm going to follow you. And then the third week, we're going to maybe let you do it yourself, right? So we just have to be realistic, and it is our job as parents to teach our kids how to be safe. It's also our job as parents not to let them see our deep anxiety and our deep fears, right? And that's our responsibility to manage that ourselves. That's for you to call me up and go, Susan, I'm really worried about this. How do I talk about it? I talk you off the ledge, and then you're able to go talk to your children. Because we shouldn't be talking about super adult, scary things in front of our little kids. But we also have to say, we have to wear a mask because there is a contagious disease. We can't lie about it. But we're not going to say, and people are dying all over the place. We're just going to say, wear a mask so that we are keeping ourselves and others safe. So I think that and we have to make sure that it's not your fear that's creating fear.
Right.
We have to be realistic.
Yeah, and that just also begets the topic, I guess, too, around showing emotions, right? Like teaching them how to be expressive with emotion, right? And not being afraid to, because I feel like too, for the longest time, I felt like, oh, like you said, I'm supposed to be that flat line. And then I realized, well, when you've got your best friend dying of cancer and they call you and they're having a really hard day, you're not going to pretend, oh, hi, mom's doing just fine right now. Even though they're sort of like, oh, why is mom sitting there crying? And
so what you say is, mom's crying because my friend is sick and I feel
right.
bad. What you're not going to say is, you're not going to describe to your kids the medical condition of your friend and with the pain she's in. You're simply
Right.
going to say, I feel sad, right?
Well, so that's I'm sorry, I just have one more question then that I remember was in the back of my mind. That brings up a really good point of like, how much do you share? Like you said, you want to share, but I guess you've kind of answered that. Like you're telling them enough. In that tween enough, right?
You share enough.
You share enough
to share everything.
Right.
Okay, Kimberly.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, so my question, because what resonated for me was stay off their roller coaster. So if your kid is on the emotional roller coaster and you don't want to get on the roller coaster, what is your guidance as far as helping them mitigate the low lows? Like, what's our responsibility as far as kind of helping them find ways to kind of pull themselves back up if they are really upset? And maybe you're right, they likely won't know why, but trying to kind of get a hold of themselves instead of like, giving into like the whole disaster brain of like spiraling into, I'm terrible at everything, or life is terrible. So, and I kind of feel like sometimes if you want to do that, empathy dictates that you need to get on the roller coaster. But
yeah, so you can get a little bit on the roller coaster.
Okay.
But I mean, when your child is going, I am so stupid, I am terrible at everything, and you feel bad because
Yes.
you love this child so much and you don't want them to feel that way. And so you're going, no, you're not, you're wonderful. Well, now your child has to work harder to explain to you that they are that bad, because that's how they're feeling.
Right.
And so when they say, I am so stupid, instead of saying, no, you're not, say, oh, I'm sorry you're feeling that way right now. Right? Let them say that to you and acknowledge that that's how they're feeling. And so if you said, oh, I'm sorry you're feeling that way right now, and they go, yeah, because I got a bad grade on my paper, then you can go, oh, I know it is hard. It never feels good to get a bad grade on a paper. Don't say, well, if you had studied more, you'd get a good grade on that paper, right? So just let them say what they want to say, and they will talk themselves down from where they are, or they will talk themselves up. Or you might say something like, I can tell you're feeling really sad right now. Is there something that I can do to help right now? No, nothing. Well, what do you think about if I gave you a hug? Do you just want to come sit next to me and we could sit together for a little while? Because the same way you recognize that they don't always know why they're feeling that way, they also don't yet know how to make themselves feel better.
Right.
I always like to, when kids are really little, I like to say, what can we do to make you feel better right now? Right? We're really there. As our kids get older, I think that question kind of becomes, what can you do to make yourself feel better right now? But the answer might still be, I don't know.
Right.
It's our job then to say, what about a hug? What about if we go for a brief walk? What if we just sit together? What can I do for you? Right? Is a way of kind of being on the roller coaster with them, right? Saying to them, you're fine. Stop thinking that way. That's not being helpful at all.
Right. So quick follow-up on that, which is, I sometimes am feeling like, okay, I'm invested in wanting to make you feel better, and I want to come up with maybe I can feed you some ideas. Like I tend to stock up on lavender bubble bath like before the school year starts. Because a bubble bath tends to have a lot of mental refreshing effects on my child. But at the same time, I also don't want, I'm trying to balance out that I don't want to coddle her to the point where like she depends on mom to make her feel better, right? Like I do need her to learn how to do that herself.
Absolutely.
So at what point?
Well, I think that you can start at this point to say, what do you, first of all, your number one job is first just to listen.
Right.
Right. And right. And I really do mean that. I think that once kids start talking, and if you are being empathetic and understanding and not trying to convince them they're wrong, right, they will eventually bring themselves down a little bit. And then you can say, what do you think you could do to make yourself feel better right now? And she might say, I don't know. And you could say, well, in the past, I think you've found, a hug was helpful, or sometimes you found a bubble bath was helpful, or sometimes you found calling a friend was helpful. And I'm wondering, do you want to do one of those things now?
Okay.
Right. So
Yeah.
you're still being supportive, but you're not saying, go take a bath, I'll run the water, and that's what you should do right now. You're still kind of leading her into finding a solution for herself. But the truth is, some kids are really independent and some kids need a little more support. And our job is to be supportive while teaching them to be independent.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, sure. So who else has a question? I think we have time for like one more question. Anybody else? See, I taught you everything you need to know.
Oh, Susan, maybe?
So Linda, I just want to thank everybody for being here. I really appreciate it. Please remember that I really am. I answer all emails, and I'll be happy to talk with anybody. I think sometimes, we're on these calls and we don't really want to pose a question. Maybe our kids are in the room, or, we don't think of it. And 5 minutes after we end this, you'll go, oh, I should have asked her. So just know that I'm available. Know that I'm here for you. I absolutely love tweens and teens. I think they can be challenging. I think that it can be confusing, but you just gotta love your kids. You just need to support them, and you need to know that kids are not being bad, okay? Kids are feeling challenged themselves, and their hormones and the life they're leading, it can be challenging sometimes. So just hang in there. I hope everyone has a wonderful summer. And Linda, I hope you invite me back either virtually or on Zoom. Hey, let's do that real quick. Everyone who's still on here, how many of you would want to continue Zoom parenting talks next